Hello, I am Alberto Villarreal, Managing Director of NEPA NOAA Transformation Advisory. We spoke about remote learning, remote working, and overall organizational transformation in the post-COVID 19 world with Pato Bichara, CEO and founder of Collective Academy.
Thank you very much for spending time with me and speaking about Collective Academy, but more importantly, about remote working, about remote learning, and how COVID-19 has really accelerated the digital transformation for every organization out there, number one. And number two, the post-COVID world, right? I mean, personally, and at NEPA NOAA, we believe that the worst mistakes that companies can make right now, it's not think about the post-COVID-19 world and thinking, I need to go back to where we were, right? Let's go back to normal. Guys, back to normal, it's not gonna be normal. So
Yesterday we had a board meeting for Collective, and we were talking about how our December 2019-2020 strategic plan just went to the trash can, and the normal is done.
well, you do not want to get me into that topic, because if we would have talked about this last year, I would have told you not to do an annual plan. Because that's one of the things that I preach to my clients. You spent all this time and then it's February and you throw it in the trash can. But we can do another Instagram Live and Zoom conversation for that one.
Sounds like a plan.
So Pato, tell us about Collective Academy. What is it? How long has it been operating? How many students do you have? How does it work?
Sure. So Collective Academy is Latin America's new university, and our purpose is to connect lifelong learners with the collective knowledge to help them reinvent the future together. We started the company 5 years ago when I was graduating from Harvard Business School. And the idea was very simple. How do we build the university for the 21st century, even before we knew that 21st century would get so interesting? And we achieve these through two types of programs. The first one is our Master in Business and Technology, which is a degree that accelerates the professional talent in Latin America. And then all our innovation and digital transformation experts help us deliver internal company programs. We call that vertical enterprise learning. And the idea is how do we help key decision makers be prepared for the future? As you were describing, a lot of the companies we work with are ongoing digital transformations, and it doesn't really matter how much systems you invest, how much strategy you make, if the people don't change the mindset. So we help business leaders change the mindset. And to date, we're a community of more than 500 professional learners.
Wow.
We're 4,000 executives, 120 mentors, and 50 companies working together to reinvent the future of the region.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful, Pato. I have two follow-up questions for that. But before asking you the questions, at NEPA NOAA this week, we released a paper, our opinion, our perspective about post-COVID-19, and the masters in technology that you were just describing. It's absolutely suitable. It's absolutely suitable for the future, because I'm assuming that apart from diving into the technologies, you're actually teaching students how to implement them and transform their organizations. And when you think of leaders of the future, and once again, COVID-19 accelerated everything, you think of two things and two things only. The first one is that person needs to understand technology. And when I say understand technology, it doesn't mean you need to learn how to code. No. Understand the use of technology for the benefit of the organization and the benefit of your team. And number two, they need to understand people. Personally, I think that the second one is more complex than the first one.
Yeah, and if you go back to our MBA classes, they always say like, hey guys, like learn all the tool set that you want, learn on the skills that you want, learn about finance and entrepreneurship and strategy. But at the end, you're gonna remember that the classes that were about people and how to lead. Yes. And that's exactly a big part of what differentiates Collective Academy Master in Business and Technology, which is, as you hear, is not an MBA. We think the administration part of the MBA already is being automatized, and the technology part plays a bigger set. But at the end, it's all about people. Like, how do we change the people's mindset? How do we give them certain tools or the specific tool set for them to do their work? and finally, the specific skill set that they need as future leaders.
And you know, I'm just remembering that we were also in business school, not together, but at the same time. You were in Harvard, and I was at Booth. And I remember that you were ranked as one of the top 10 business school students at that time. I'm talking 2014, maybe. And I vividly recall the reviews that other students and professors gave you, and it was your ability to connect people with each other. That was what they highlighted as your best skill.
And that's what we're doing now. We're connecting lifelong learners with each other, with mentors, and with the collective knowledge. Because at the end, an important part of today's educational system is that the content and the knowledge is already there. So it's all a matter of how do we connect with each other, like we're doing today, you based from Chicago, I'm in Monterrey, and how do we make that knowledge applicable?
True. Pato, when you mentioned the demographics of the students of Collective Academy, and you also hear the description of Collective Academy, you hear Latin America. Is it because it's based in Latin America, or is it because the programs are in Spanish? Or for example, if I want to join from Chicago, can I join Collective Academy from Chicago?
That's a great question. Our focus has been mostly Mexico and Latin America, because even though most of our content is in English in terms of what our students read, listen to, and the videos they watch, the conversations and the Socratic discussions happen in Spanish, and the practical exercise are led in Spanish. The interesting part is, as you know, the US has a lot of alternative education options and upskilling and reskilling options. And we saw the opportunity specifically in Mexico and Latin America. We had some students from the US that speak Spanish, and even some students that live in the US and are Hispanic or Mexican American or Latinos in general.
Correct.
So our online program is open to everyone in the region. Overall in the Americas, mostly for a time zone perspective. But yeah, we're open to anyone that wants to improve their leadership and digital game with having interesting conversations and practical experiences in Spanish.
Beautiful. So Pato, when we think about the future, when we think about post-COVID, well, actually, let's talk a little bit about COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, many people that are either transitioning from one job to another, or literally they have a job, but they just happen to have a lot of time. I mean, there is that situation. I think there's two buckets, right? The first bucket is we're running at a million miles an hour to survive and to actually be better positioned. But there's the other bucket where you have a lot of people that are like, okay, well, you know, we're just going to wait for this to pass. And Collective Academy and other institutions that provide remote learning opportunities have definitely thrived. They're seeing an increase in the applications, I assume, over the last 3-4 weeks. So based on your experience over the last couple of years, how do you see the future of remote learning?
It's very interesting because I think that overall crisis typically redefine the future, and they write a different future. In this specific case, I think, as you were mentioning, COVID-19 just accelerated the future of what was going to happen with universities, with companies, etc. In our specific case, to give you an example, we had 2 digital cohorts, and now we have 8 because we had no option. No, Global Silicon Valley, a Silicon Valley Education Fund reports that about 30% of the U.S. undergraduates had taken part in online learning in 2017. Right now, it's probably like 100%. No, so we're seeing this shift in trends, and at the same time as we're seeing the shift in trends, we're building a new normal. Sure. Because as the World Economic Forum was mentioning, I think that many innovations and specifically changing behavior are going to help us move this forward. How do we think about the future? We definitely don't think that everything will be remote learning, but we're thinking about it in 3 ways at Collective Academy. No? The first one is what we call boundless learning. And that's going to blend online and offline best capabilities to actually be able to tailor-made experiences that are short, that are intense, and that are suitable for our students and our learners. No? So if right now for the next 3 months you're going to be in Chicago, you're able to study remotely. If you're going to be in Mexico City, we're able to serve you on site. No? Okay. And at the same time, in different times, no, we were used to that class started at a specific time in the campus outside of the city, and now we're taking out those bounds from learning and universities in general. The second quality is quantified learning. it's very interesting how grades are completely outdated and they don't really work at all. And what we're trying to build is how do we evaluate learning and student readiness for the workplace more like they give us feedback and performance management in the day-to-day organization, right? And that means link it to personal development, to career goals, to workplace performance metrics, and include their mentors, their bosses, and their peers' feedback through proprietary algorithms. Wow. And that's what I call return on learning. No, like how can we make sure that what the dollars you invest in learning and education has a return for you?
Sure.
And the last thing, which we already touched upon, is this idea of lifelong learning. How do we make a membership-based model of a lifelong learning culture that includes several hundreds of learning opportunities, and specifically to a digital enabled community? I always say that Collective Academy today, more than being a neo university, it's a community of students, which we have a lot of them in the live, of students, of mentors that are helping and connecting each other. And we think that the future of learning is definitely social, is definitely connected, and is definitely measurable, as we were mentioning.
That's great, Pato. That's great. I mean, when I think of what you're saying, we focus a lot on the individual, but I also want to touch a little bit on the partnerships that Collective Academy can do with different businesses, right? From my business perspective, from the NEPA NOAA perspective, I work with international companies through transformations in Latin America. Many of these transformations, most of these transformations actually are technology related, whether it's artificial intelligence, RPA, going to the cloud, ERP, fine. But there's always that challenge, which is teaching people, right, to use the new tool, to go over the new process. And whenever you do any of these transformations, it's not a matter of changing the employee's perspective of saying, hey, now this is going to be the process. It's going to be A, B, C, and D. No, what you want to do is you want to teach them to use the tool. Once again, going back to the two qualities that we talked about leadership, it's understanding the technology so that you can use it for the benefit of the organization. So where I'm going with this is thinking of the partnerships that Collective can do with businesses. What has been your experience there? How do you envision that model of upskilling, right, the employees?
Good question. So we work with a lot of multinationals and technology companies in Mexico, including some of the household names like Bimbo, like Uber, like Google, like Twitter, no?
Yeah.
And what we're seeing is, I guess they're all being, the main question is how do we train our people? How do we change the mindset of our people, as we were mentioning? Different to other industries in the education space, it's not a winner takes all, right? Like education, talent, and workforce development are very big industries that they need everyone to evolve and everyone to change, no? So for example, universities and tertiary institutions are coming on with their strong brands and their budgets to like try to address these companies. The edtech giants like Coursera, like Udemy, like Degree have some advantages and are also serving these clients. And education startups we have an advantage, which is like we're agile, we're accountable, and we can start serving specific segments of our clients in a very special way. No, so
okay.
The interesting part is not how do we compete with each other, but how do we supplement each other? And to us specifically, how can we become that partner for the chief people officers and the chief HR officers of our clients to identify what each of them needs at an organizational level,
yes,
for what each of their employees needs, and what resources are available for them to craft these learning experiences and help them develop their people.
Yeah, you touched on something very important on when you were answering the last question, and you mentioned it's about obtaining the ROI, right, and being able to measure if the students are actually learning and applying it in their day-to-day activities. A very basic metric that all educational programs measure is, hey, when you graduate, now usually our students, they increase their salary by X or Y. But to me, that doesn't seem like a how to say it, a satisfying metric to say, hey, it's because I'm actually using the skills. So what have you seen? I mean, what type of feedback are you getting, both from your students and from the companies that they work at, that say, you know what, Patricio, what you are teaching at Collective Academy is really what we needed?
Great question. So I'll start with the traditional approach, which you already mentioned. Our students, on average, from the beginning of the program to their graduation, end up making 50% more in terms of salary.
Okay.
About 95% of them increase in responsibilities throughout these 14 months of our program. So the measurable outcomes are there. Then from from an organizational perspective,
Correct.
About each company that sponsors a Collective Academy student to our master program, for the next cohort, they send 2.5. So we have companies, for example, BBVA, which started Bancomer, which started sending us 1 student, then they sent 2, and now we have over 10 students from BBVA Bancomer in our program.
Fantastic.
And when we talk to them, because it's still very qualitative, and hopefully this year we'll release a more quantitative approach to that. When we talk to them, is like our Collective Academy students know pretty much how to do 3 things pretty well. One is they know what they don't know. So as a general management digital program, we teach them a lot of features and specific content that makes them able to ask better questions. And in the post-COVID world, we think that the ability to make better questions is going to be highly superior than the ability to respond them, because the answers are already in Google, right?
Yeah.
The second thing is they know how to interact with each other and interact with each other, including technology, which, as I mentioned, I always say, like, technology is part of the team, and you need to be able to lead technology, to guide technology, to ask the questions to technology, and expect answers from them. And the third thing is this capability of being able to envision a future for themselves as professional individuals, for their organizations, and for the industry as a whole.
Okay. Pato, I'm going to switch a little bit gears, because we've been speaking a lot about the individuals, but now let's think of a company, and I may even go back into your consulting days with this question, and your business school days. Actually, Patricio, I don't know if you remember, but I was a client of yours back in 2009. Man, Amayo, I'm not sure you're old because you're not married, you don't have kids, but I am old, my friend. Back in 2009, I was in CCM when you were at McKinsey doing the
at Bain, the
acquisition,
doing the post-merger integration of Heineken.
The post-merger of Heineken. I remember that. I remember those days. Oh my God! Wow, we have history, my friend. So I was going to ask you, from an organizational level, talking about post-merger integrations. Let's talk about how the organizational structure of businesses is going to change post-COVID. You know, one thing is to say, hey, okay, now we've tested, now we know that, and I'm just going to touch on specific functions, right? FP&A, perhaps accounting, HR, some of the marketing functions. It's been proven that they don't have to be at the office to function, right? You know, this is what COVID-19 does. But it's just going to be natural for businesses to identify 2 things during this time. The first one is, hey, there are roles that can absolutely be performed remotely. And the second one, it's going to be, actually, I don't need this
X, Y, Z.
tasks, X, Y, and Z. And it's just going to come natural. It's going to be a natural assessment. And also, Pato, you know, as there, many companies are going to be very cost conscious, at least for the rest of 2020, you know, especially in Latin America, we are going to see some, you know, it's going to be tough to see a growth for most businesses, right? So thinking about the organizational structure, we believe here at Nepanoa that it's going to be a lot more flexible, right? The organizational structure of organizations are going to be more flexible. Now, by saying that they're going to be flexible, it doesn't mean that there won't be direct report lines. It doesn't mean that there will not be decision responsibilities, but it does mean that it will be less hierarchical and there will be a lot of teamwork, right? So with this in mind, Patricio, how do you see it? How do you see the future organizational model for companies in the post-COVID world? How do you think it's going to change in the next months?
I think this crisis is highlighting a trend that was already in the workplace, which is around agility.
Correct.
And as you probably know from your clients, many corporations had already agile teams. And this was a trend about how do we operate in an agile way. That sometimes it seems as a buzzword, and we can make also another
podcast about agile.
Yeah, but I think the crisis is moving agile to the decision-making level, to the executive level. And as you probably know, I think being a CEO and a C-level executive, is one of the hardest jobs right now for two things. One is things are changing by the minute, or if not, at least by the hour. The other day it happened to us. We send an email to our community with certain highlights for the week afterwards. It was a Thursday night, and we send it at 6:30 p.m. At 7 p.m. the government declared the phase 2. No, so what we have already said was useless, because we're hoping to come back in April 20th, and now we're going to come back a week later. No, but I think at a C level, the importance here is like how do you make decisions quickly, with some reflection and some learning, and then translating those learnings to the organization, and then prepare for a definitely changed world like we started. No, I like what this saying that Americans have, that we're not in Kansas anymore. And I don't want to play the prophet here. I can't tell you how organizational structures are going to change, nor operating models, but I see a few trends on our crisis responses as the business sector that I think they're here to stay. And let's talk about them. The first one, which I already mentioned, is this agile decision making, and the important part is the learning.
Yeah.
How do we make quick decisions? How do we react, knowing that we're not gonna get it perfect, right? The second one, which is related, is this idea about lean execution and experimentation.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting part of this crisis is that we're all living it together as humanity. And I've seen, and I believe that customers and suppliers and our teams are going to be more forgiving of us if we make mistakes. So if we decide to move quickly and experiment something, and for X, Y, or Z doesn't work as we plan, I think we have an option of as long as we learn something about it, move forward easily. And and I think two more that we can get further if you want. One is definitely accountability. People need to be responsible, one, for their decisions, and two, of their actions. And the last one, which I think you already touched upon, it's like this asset lightness. At least from my world, which is startups and venture capital, a lot of the startups in Mexico are starting to question if they need larger offices or even an office. And I think this office question applies to every asset that we're using.
Correct. So I'm going to react, Pato, to the last point that you mentioned. When we hire people at Nepanoa, and I always ask this question, is do you want an office? I have not. This is Nepanoa's office here in Chicago. I have not received a yes. I haven't. Every person that I interview, I ask them, do you want an office? Because of course, you and I growing up, we saw those big corporations, right?
It was aspirational.
It was aspirational. It was that dream. It was like, oh, I do want that Nepanoa sign on Reforma in Mexico City. You know, it's like I dreamed about that. And you know what? Maybe I will not get there, and it's okay. As long as the TV's happening, we're actually doing good work. But that's the question that I always ask to the people that I'm interviewing. I liked what you said, because it goes aligned with being flexible, being agile, making decisions. But then you said everybody's responsible for their work product. Everybody's responsible for their actions. It gives an organization as a whole, the resources of an organization, a lot of more independence. And I've spoken to some clients, specifically as we're planning the way to actually gather the right information and go into the future in the post-COVID world. And they tell me, Alberto, we're more connected than before.
Yeah.
Because many times it's so difficult for someone to stand up and go to the office that's 2 doors down, that actually to set a chat or just, pick up the phone. And this whole situation, also everybody, it's like, okay, I need to be aware of what's going on so I can participate. So people in organizations are connecting more. Now, your third point, which I really liked, and I've been preaching for the past 4 weeks to our clients, is this is a crisis. And during a crisis, Pato, two things happen. Number one, it's people are flexible. They're willing to rally behind change. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't only apply to the employees of a company, but it also applies to your clients. So yes, this is a great time to test. But I'm going to preface it, because before you even release the test, I would even ask clients to talk to your employees, to talk to your clients, to talk to your suppliers, because maybe there won't be enough chances in the future to literally, hey, send a survey, hey, do a follow-up, an individual follow-up. because COVID-19 has been different for everybody. Your experience and my experience have been completely different, right? And perhaps our regular our regular day is similar, right? But because of COVID-19, your experience and my experience has been completely different. So speak to your clients, speak to your suppliers, speak to your employees, but gather that information. Hey, how could we be adding more value? Ask the question, hey, when this is over, what would you like to see from us? Or ask your employees, hey, what do you think? Did something come up over the past 2-3 weeks that you think we should be doing? And that's the right way to use this time and actually test something. And as you mentioned, clients and employees are going to be willing to rally behind it. Look, you know what? We know these are tough circumstances. So because they're tough circumstances, let me provide you feedback of how you can do it better when things go back to normal. So you're right on spot. It's use this time proactively to test. And the second thing that I was going to mention, so the first one is that it's rally behind any change or any test. And
let me quickly just address what you're saying, because I think
sure,
that's more the mentality of an ideal of a frog design firm than of a McKinsey and a BCG and a Bain, right? And I think that the importance about talking to your customers, being customer centric, being customer obsessed, and understanding that it is not a time to be making models in Excel and beautiful presentations.
Correct.
It is a time to be out in the world, talking to our clients, our partners, our employees, our customers, and showing up. Because I think a big part of what's going to happen is people will remember some of our actions, but they'll remember also how do we respond as leaders to the situation.
Correct. Pato, if you reach out to think of a manufacturing company right now. If you're reaching out to your suppliers just to understand what's their situation right now, that's going to create a bond that may be unbreakable in the future. I spoke to a client. It's a maquila company, and in the maquila industry, you know, they manufacture underwear and then they ship it back to the United States. Well, the orders were canceled, but it was because of that partnership, of that strong bond, that the American company called them and said, "Look, what's the minimum you need to stay open, to not close the production line?" So
to not let people go.
That's a partnership. That's a partnership, right? You know, so they told them, hey, it's X boxes, fine, that's the order, right? Then they had to close because the government said so, but that's a different story.
Yeah.
But that's a partnership. And the other thing that I was going to mention, Pato, is that companies should take advantage of also the internal changes that they have been dreading to do. Think of those processes that you know that have to be re-engineered, but you're like, you just didn't have the time. Right? Or think of those training opportunities, right? You've always wanted your people to learn X or Y skill. Hey, do it now.
Why don't we pause and do it?
Why don't we pause and do it? I mean, there's a natural pause, right? I mean, even the businesses that are open, most of them are operating at 50, 60%. I mean, because there's no, I mean, or if they weren't operating at 50 or even less percentage during the past 3-4 weeks, believe me, the next 3-4 weeks, they will. That's just the world that we're in right now. So use that opportunity for that. Think about it, right? Start planning for, you know, remote work. If you're going to come back and you're going to say, okay, now the office is optional for everybody, or X, Y, and Z roles, you can work from home if you want. Well, that has to be supported by processes, by policies that take time.
By tools.
Those are things by tools. Those are things that simply take time. So use this time to do them so that when COVID-19 comes to an end or we're going back to normal, we can move on.
You know? The other day I was talking to a chief HR officer and CFO of one of Mexico's large banks, and he was mentioning how they're implementing Slack, and they're implementing project management tools like Monday, like Trello, and they're implementing daily stand-ups at 9 a.m. to check on each other's team. So I think the future is very bright as long as we make the right changes to our mindset first, as we mentioned, and then to these tools, processes, and actions that are going to help us maintain this new normal for the upcoming months and hopefully years.
I completely agree, Pato. I completely agree. Pato, I do not want to bore our viewers anymore.
Our few followers.
Do you have any ideas or any closing remarks?
No, I would just like to invite your audience to visit collectiveacademy.com to learn more about us, and our audience at Collective Academy to visit nipanoa.com to learn more about the work you're building. And I hope at least that this is the first of many interesting conversations that we're going to have in the coming weeks.
I'm sure, Pato. Thank you very much for the plug. Thank you very much for your time. Greatly appreciated. Good luck on the future of Collective Academy. You know that I've been a fan since day one, and I will continue to be a fan. Hopefully, I may become either a student or a professor. You tell me.
You're gonna be a mentor soon. I have a few sessions lined up for you, so wait for it.
Sounds good. It will be my pleasure. All right, Pato. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone who was listening to us. See you soon.
Bye-bye.